The Gospel of Zilch by the nonprofit Tim Snavely. Chapter 31. To Buddhists. From Timbo Slice, a humble disciple of the Go Your Own Way, to those trying to reach nirvana and live rightly by the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama the Buddha. May what I call the great nothingness that comes after be reached by all of you Buddhists. My dear friends, consider the thought. If there is only emptiness in the enlightened Buddhist, then murder and the loss of life are of no consequence. It is just another thing that happens. It is not a thing that is wrong or in error. So then why is murder more in line with wrong living than with right living? If the objects of the mind cannot reconcile this dichotomy of wishes from the Dharma of the Buddha, righteousness within emptiness, this is what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. So then, how can wrongness emerge from no murder in the empty? How can we say right living is not wrong living when there is only no living? I was surprised at how anti-thinking your religion appears to be, seeing as your current Dalai Lama has an impressive mind I hope to converse with someday. What I got from a few of your scriptures is that it appears to tell disciples of Buddhism to turn off their brains as much as possible, have no opinions, and have no preferences. Using my own terminology, I understand the self to be null, and if the self is null, and there is only no self. But where I diverge from Buddha is that Buddha appears to try and make it so that the Buddha's Dharma is more easily replicated to his disciples. But that still doesn't show us how the emptiness and nirvana are the actual truth in the way of the matter of self-discipline and meditation. I have the opinion that we can have our cake and eat it too when it comes to our interpretations of the truth. Just rephrase this truth like I have as follows. You can have your opinions, you can believe what you want, just don't cause harm for the sake of a notion, because of the truth that everything will come to naught. To be naught right now is to be in equilibrium, so to disturb another's equilibrium is not being naught, but being naughty. Harmlessly defending your ideas with better evidence and logical axioms is all I wish from you, considering you are so close to the truth already. There is this concept of Buddhists having a preference for the truth of enlightenment, all while suggesting the enlightened Buddhist have no preference at all. So what does that truth look like, if only those who have reached enlightenment have reached the state of no enlightenment? It would seem as if anyone who reached enlightenment would be ignorant of whether or not they have actually reached the truth when they got there, as to make the first teaching never happen in the first place unless it was out of pretense. Wouldn't endarkenment be a better word to use for this paradox? And on the concept of ignorance, how does a Buddhist defend against such an insult? Would the Buddha suggest that you just ignore it? This would surely give ignorance a new meaning. No. How easy will you let outsiders call your way wrong and ignorant? How do you actually deal with these misconceptions? By peacefully providing evidence to the contrary and showing them the knowledge you have so that they may become better by it. Inwardly, a Buddhist can be unmoved by the insults of outsiders, but to the world, the axioms towards enlightenment provided by the Buddha need to be convincing enough on the surface to entice those others to join your in-group in peace. So telling newcomers to Buddhism not to have a preference for truth is rather counterintuitive as well. Concerning your Four Noble Truths, the Buddha himself seemed to add a bunch of things to suffering that is not innately suffering. Although I would bet your modern thinkers have evolved sufficiently to be better equipped to handle these concerns, dukkha from the perspective of the Enlightened One should be of paramount importance. It appears that near the end of his life, the Buddha clarified that all of the following are forms of suffering: birth, aging, sickness, death, dealing with unpleasant things, being separated from pleasant things, failing to attain one's desires, and the entire composition of the mind and body. So with this definition of suffering, it's no wonder that he felt suffering was innate to existence. I, for one, am not convinced that the whole composition of the mind and body are in a constant state of suffering, although perhaps in a constantly fluctuating state between suffering and pleasure while evolving in form. So, just to argue semantics, here is a more reasonable definition of suffering by saying, Suffering is the state of undergoing pain, distress, or hardship. It can be an experience of unpleasantness and aversion associated with the act of harm or perception of harm or threat of harm within an individual. It comes in quantities ranging from mild to intolerable. The opposite of suffering is pleasure, happiness, and serenity. Going back to ignorance, I find it intriguing that Buddhists seem to give a pessimistic exception to negative qualia, but thoroughly rejecting that positive qualia have any part in the actual nature of the reality of things. Why is it an active misconception to see the pleasure in pain and beauty in ugliness? Where is the basis for the innateness of suffering, so to speak? I could just as well make the assertion that there is pleasure that is innate to existence, for if we were all suffering, nobody would want to stay alive long enough to reproduce. Both of those positions appear to be identically based on nothing as of yet, so to spout either of them as truth, and noble ones at that, is questionable. To make the irrationality of this assertion clear, follow these premises to their conclusions. Premise 1. You cannot exist in this life without suffering, as stated in the First Noble Truth. Premise 2. Only the ignorant find pleasure in pain, as pleasure is seen as an active misunderstanding of the First Noble Truth. Irrational conclusion 1. If you experience any level of pleasure in this life, you are surely ignorant. Irrational conclusion 2. If you want to claim that you have reached Buddha's level of enlightenment, you should never experience pleasure. Here, rather than view life as a net negative with no positive to balance against it, consider the following stance instead before throwing it to the wayside as ignorance. Life is neutral. As individuals, we can roam between the mountains of pleasure and the valleys of suffering, and be influenced by our environment. If you are in a stale room eating stale food, you're probably living a stale and boring life. If you're in a hostile or tense environment, suffering will find you there. But if you're surrounded by loving people in a peaceful environment, it is pleasure that will find you there. If you want to remove suffering from your life, use all of your physical and mental strength to remove unnecessarily hostile and harmful agents from your life. Then allow yourself to become an agent for others' pleasure by loving others. There are many ways to show and receive love, so allow yourself to receive love in a form that you enjoy. And if you must, change your environment. But try the love thing first and see if that alone can end your suffering. Perhaps if you are ambitious enough, you could create a positive change to the hostile and tense environments while you are there. So be adaptable and exercise your ability to love, because you never know what life is going to throw at you next. Life is more, a whole lot more, than just pain and suffering. Approximately 24 other things to be exact, but just to name a few, there is love. There is a better life you can live right now. No cycle of rebirth assumed. So learn and grow yourself as an individual. There is a lot of verifiable knowledge that we have at our disposal to seek out. There are even the genuine opposites of suffering found in reality within happiness, serenity, and pleasure. But if I have these three things, a love to give, a respect for life, and an ability and means to seek truth, I can take whatever suffering and pain existence can throw at me and push through like a boss. Please hear me on this. People can be in an overall state of contentment and pleasure while aging. There can be valleys of suffering, and I can accept that. But is life one constant, inescapable valley of peaks, whose peaks are found in the enlightening equilibrium? Heck to the no! So please don't assume my perception of pleasure leads to the conclusion of my ignorance of the reality of things. That's actually a non sequitur. To further drive the point home for this wrong understanding of right understanding, consider the following point. For there to be a misconception of something, there must first be a conception of something. And conception is very much a subjective term, where the original conception is subjective to the one who perceives it. What is perceived by one, what is understood by one, can be noticeably in contrast with another whilst not being inherently wrong. As the saying goes, beauty lies in the eye of the beholder. What looks ugly to one person can look beautiful to another. What tastes bitter to someone can be made sweet with just a spoonful of sugar. Some people prefer 2 spoonfuls of sugar, and some people will take the bitterness head on. They each have a unique balance of flavors that perpetuate their individual equilibriums. Pain and pleasure are subjective to the one receiving them. Just because somebody is hard into BDSM doesn't mean that they aren't thoroughly enjoying themselves. I'd argue that being mentally adaptable to allow yourself to find pleasure in otherwise painful situations isn't ignorance. In fact, you could very well be aware of the pain aspect of it, all the while finding ways to attain pleasure for yourself. You may be in a dull waiting room outside a doctor's office full of suffering, but that doesn't mean the comic books and magazines suddenly become unamusing. Concerning nirvana, I bring you good news and bad news concerning this end of suffering. The good news is that the state of nirvana is inevitable for everything and everyone. And even more so, the nirvana mindset of rest and peace is always available to us. We do not need to wait until after we die to experience the great nothingness. Zilch and Nada will always be there to whisper their sweet nothings to ease our minds. The bad news is that the rebirthing cycle is likewise inevitable for everything and everyone. There is no special way out of it. All we can strive for is achieving inner peace now. If you can find it now, and I'm sure you will, then you will have already experienced that peace every reincarnation in the past, and you will experience it again every reincarnation in the future. This is the primary reason why one should not kill themselves, because if they do, they surely will for every reincarnation, and their sufferings in that sense will never end. But their suffering is also ours, for we are all one in nothing. There is no Buddhist nor nihilist, there is neither enlightened nor ignorant, there is no male nor female, for we are all one in null. Our individual experiences may be unique, and there may be reasons to go our separate ways. The independence of every spirit, one from another, might be the healthier interpretation. On one hand, nothing unites us, and on the other, nothing unites us. There is restlessness that comes with those whose ways are in disequilibrium, so the individual null should strive to help those who need peace while holding that very peace within themselves, regardless of the dissonance around them. Our differing interpretations of reincarnation should also be discussed, since I think there is a problem with your particular interpretation of the rebirthing process when you look into deep time. A long, long time ago in this universe, there was the first life, and a long, long time from now, there will be a final life. They'll most likely be microscopic organisms, these alpha and omega life forms. So the question goes, at what level of complexity will reincarnation be allowed to occur, and under what conditions? If you look back to the first organism in the universe that went through a process of reincarnation, there would be more and more new inhabitants to reincarnate into than there would be old souls to inhabit them. In other words, right now, you may be a new life, or you may be the continuation of an old life. That is if our current understanding of reincarnation is Buddhist understanding. But as the re-inhabitable population grows, the old souls would never catch up with the total number of inhabitable vessels. Therefore, some of those vessels would be new souls. And what happens when the re-inhabitable population declines? There would be a soul queue waiting to be reincarnated, but then that would break the constancy of the constant cycle of rebirth. And we could never be sure if the new population rate will be higher than the old soul rate minus the nirvana soul rate. Moving on, those of you with wisdom may be persuaded by me saying that right speech in and of itself will not end a null suffering. Why? Because we hold a right understanding of the purpose of right speech. The entire purpose of speech is to communicate with others, correct? So what would happen if you were to have such a high degree of executing right speech, but the individual you are trying to communicate with is a dastardly fool? Surely, even after 7 sharp reprimands with the most eloquently precise speech, nothing will be accomplished. So if you have stupid people in your life whom you need to communicate with, suffering will not cease. I'd recommend this fold's premise to be expanded and become right communication. Because what's the point of having right speech when you have wrong writing and wrong listening involved. Disequilibrium, chaos, and endless talking past each other and endless debates that get us no closer to the truth will be the result. The best we can do concerning this fold to end our suffering is to hone in, clarify, and oftentimes simplify our speech and writing, and merely hope that it is heard and read as we originally intended it. Considering the sixth fold of right effort, I noticed that the phrase strains his mind and struggles was used a lot by Buddha while explaining what right effort is. It appears to me that straining and struggling would contradict the overall goal to end all suffering. I'll try not to get too pedantic on this point because I do understand the intent behind the words, like how the body needs to exercise to become strong, and the mind too needs to exercise. But from what can be observed to happen in many of the high-level monks of Buddhism, it seems the idea of nirvana is to do nothing. When monks meditate for an excessively long period of time, like the deep stance of meditation called tuktum, they show that the epitome of Buddhism, or the penultimate step towards full enlightenment, is to meditate and otherwise do nothing. It just baffles me. Why even put effort to overcome the evils we perceive around us if your tuktum meditations of doing nothing will end your suffering? While we are alive, equilibrium is the goal, and doing nothing rarely accomplishes that goal since, we need to eat, drink, and breathe to survive and remain alive. We will do plenty of nothing when we're dead. I do hope you take these remarks given in right communication. If there is something that in Buddhist philosophy that you believe that I have a completely wrong understanding of, please correct me. Just respect my time, please, and do your best to keep it to 5 paragraphs or less. My mind is capable of changing, and since I know where your minds are in general, I presume that among the major religions, Buddhists are most capable of changing their minds. I would just advise you to not give up a healthy amount of skepticism in exchange for faith in the unknown, and you should still a fairly serene life. The goddess Nothing gives you guys laser eye vision to enact right communication to the best of her ability. To stop trying to do her. The goddess Nobody says that she is ready for you to do her whenever you are good and ready. Continue in your way of meditation, for it is unique and of noticeable value. The Holy Spirit is working to perfect all of our ways, so accept its correction whenever it corrects you. Chapter 32. To Hindus. From Timothy Knoll, the primary guru of dimensionalism. To the polytheist and those who affiliate with the religion of Hinduism. May the many personable and impersonable iterations of nothingness displayed within the rest of this book be deemed true by you as having the attributes of Vishnu. For what it's worth, I have been impressed and inspired by your philosophy. I came up with most of this dimensionalism without much prior knowledge of Hinduism, and considering that there are so many similarities between our frameworks, dimensionalism could show how Hinduism, even though it is the oldest religion, holds the most universally true concepts. What you call the Atman, I call Null. What you call Brahman, I call Nobody. What you call Vishnu, I call Zilch. What you call the way of meditation, I call the way of self-discipline, and both alike desire the individual to reach a state of internal equilibrium. I wanted to clarify with you this concept of how the Null/Self connects us to the Brahman. On the scale of everything that currently exists, the human Null is but a point. We are an infinitesimal thing that barely adds anything to the whole. Every body, by itself, is a nobody. This is an oversimplification, but it is a start to understanding the connection. Because it is not the body that determines and knows the body, but the mind. And as easy as it may be for us to pin down the mind to the body's brain, a working brain is not equivalent to a working mind. We sleep and lose our consciousness. We steep into a coma and lose contact with the outside world, all while the brain is still alive and working. So what is the core of the mind? The hard problem of consciousness is asked and presupposes nothing to come to the answer. So the null hypothesis for the conscious mind is that nothing can be extracted from the body and contain that which is the self. It then follows that if we take this nothing out of the body, every segment that is otherwise deemed the body still remains, but it would not quite contain the self any longer. The Brahman is everywhere, yes? Yet the Brahman is also without a body and contains within it the potentiality for a mind. This is why my Brahman is called nobody. And since the nothing that is extracted from the body is null, hypothesized to contain the mind, what contains the mind is likewise a nobody. But you and I alike recognize that our bodily strengths are powerless and weak in comparison to the Brahman, so we rightfully give ourselves a distinguishing label to differentiate the two phenomena. We let nobody be nobody, and let null be null, but recognize that these are ultimately the same thing from the grandest of perspectives. I also want to commend you on the 4 ways of yoga that you hold on to. I could not think of any new ways to the 4 your philosophical ancestors came up with to reach self-actualization. This doesn't mean there isn't a 5th way to be deduced in the future, just that if there is such a 5th way, it bypasses my detection. And although the ways to self-actualization are clearly few in quantity, and these paths are worthy of desire, I do wonder how many ways to self-destruction exist as well. Please, if any gurus among you have contemplated this categorization of the highway to hell, so to speak, do me a favor and clearly list them out and send them my way. Better yet, if a think tank of gurus would create such a list. The concepts behind Vedic mathematics are also intriguing. It is a shame that it doesn't work in base 2, but for the normies of the world, who will probably never use base 2, it would make math much more enjoyable. I'm surprised that I didn't learn it this way. Quantitative measurements are too damn sufferable for our species for the most part, and zilch damn it, if Vedic mathematics can reduce the suffering in the world, then everybody should know it. Flatteries aside, I do have a few criticisms for you that I hope will edify you and make your religion even better philosophically than what it already is. For example, after reading through the Bhagavad Gita, I had this question concerning sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic diets. This is just for fun and warming up, a rhetorical question that we both know the answer to. Is a burnt habanero sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic? Is it sattvic because it is healthy, rajasic because it is spicy, or tamasic because it is overcooked? And what about an espresso made from old coffee beans? Is it sattvic because it begets cheerfulness from the caffeine boost it produces, rajasic because it tastes bitter, or tamasic because it is stale? Clearly, these two things are applicable under all 3 diets. But this concept of sattvic diets bringing cheerfulness, based on the Gita 17, 8-10, is still so vague as to merit bringing Hindu thinkers back to the drawing board. No food makes my wife more cheerful than some good fried chicken. And for me, I get really giddy over some Domino's pizza with all of the toppings available to me. So is pizza sattvic? Is fried chicken sattvic? I am literally asking for a friend. Now, onto the things of more serious concern. Let's take the ideas behind the caste system, for example. If there are 4 ways of yoga, and no one is prevented from walking multiple ways to self-realization at the same time, then we as humans are likewise not prevented from bettering ourselves in multiple strata of caste at the same time. I am an intellectual, but simply being an intellectual in this day and age does not pay the bills. So I am also a working class citizen of the world. And if the world would have me and my successor, I would not withhold myself from entering my role of what you would call the noble class as well. Of course, we are all truly part of a noble class, since no being is exempt from being connected to our divine selves, which you call the Atman. I also have these inquiries about your interpretation of reincarnation. Reason with me here. I know you can. Upon fondly walking the way of wisdom, I have deduced that Hindus often mix up the reincarnation of the cosmos with the reincarnation of the self. To elaborate, if the whole of the cosmos is destined to reincarnate from nothing to nothing again, why does the self reincarnating from self to self need to be even more complicated? Logically speaking, somewhere in the current reincarnation of the universe, there was a first self that came after the beginning of the universe, then a second, then a third, and so forth. All of these beings are connected in a one-to-one ratio to other selves in past and future reincarnations of the universe. Yes? I know, this is a kind of presupposition at the moment, but bear with me. How then, with the Hindu model, does one self reincarnate to another self within the same reincarnation of the cosmos? I feel that this assertion is itself an additional presupposition more than what is necessary to prove yourselves right in this regard. Sure, you need this presupposition to make your version of karma work, but is the concept of karma really beneficial for people to hold? Karma, in its current state, tends to unjustly condemn otherwise innocent victims of untestable and unverifiable wrong. Does a child get raped? Oh, it's just bad karma from a past life or earlier in this life. Really? Stuff and nonsense. Blaming the victim for any reason, whether it is the clothes they wear, the smile they give, the karma they possess, or the attractiveness of their entity to you, is not their fault. This finger pointing is just some bullshit men come up with to try and justify their heinous actions of disequilibrium, and it frankly has to stop. Take this opportunity to begin taking responsibility for your actions in this incarnation. Grab the equilibrium of nirvana by the balls, and nobody will provide you with the fruits of the Holy Spirit, which are compassion, laughter, tranquility, contentment, intrepidness, wisdom, philanthropy, self-discipline, and being altogether chill as fuck. When you embrace the null mentality, karma no longer has an effect on you. Just be and let it be as it is without adding or taking away karma or anything else from it. But be on your guard and think critically, for our individual will to power will always be there to tempt us to cause chaos. So firmly tell thoughts and actions of disequilibrium to fuck off, and they will surely flee from you. And chakras too. Why are these mythical connections to our body necessary to explain anything beyond what can be explained with physiological means? Why all of these bouts of unnecessary somethingness? Please, for the love of Zilch, see how chakras are null. There is the consciousness of null. This much is apparent. Only a fool would deny the self-awareness that their entity holds. But to break up the Atman into 7 or 8 parts of the body is the opposite of applying Occam's razor. I am assuming that this is what would be required for the emergence of chakras to even begin to be considered real. Even though 0 equals 0 divided by 7, the 7 are given unique indistinguishable substance which are oddly unfitting, since the makeup of the 7 infinitesimals is still nothing. The null hypothesis will be waiting to spar against your chakra hypothesis. Since some gurus among you have been quacking falsely, I would encourage you to put on the full armor of null. Our battlefield is in the mind, and we each have our own. If you can win your own mind over, you will be ready to stand against any falsehood or disequilibrium that will befall you. So put on the belt of scientific truth buckled around your waist, with the sweater vest of social justice in place, and slip on the fuzzy slippers of peace, because they are quite comfy. In addition to this, bring along some humble pie to accept the possibility that you may be wrong. You can go your own way to put on whatever headgear seems appropriate to you, but I recommend either the Derby of Wisdom, the Beanie of Relativity, or Schrodinger's ball cap. Equip yourselves with tools such as Occam's razor, the hitch slap, and Snavely's vacuum, which is the word of nothing. To conclude, learn to be free in mind while constraining your actions by thoroughly thinking before you act. Concerning anyone who doth read this letter, recognize that I am by no means saying that all Hindus who believe in these questionable hypotheses are stupid or wrong. Nobody is exempt from holding an incorrect idea in some area. My reprimands should be taken as a healthy challenge to provide a more thorough methodology to convince even the harshest skeptic to take these ideas seriously. Faith is based on Zilch and nada, so to give the faith credulity, there must be evidence in support of it. Peace be with you. How to reach self-actualization. This guide to self-actualization is inspired by both Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs and Hindu theology to achieve what they call self-realization. It's not a perfect model to achieve self-actualization / null realization, but they hold a solid couple of templates to build my own Franken theory. The basic premise for Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that it is much easier to grow as a person when your basic physiological needs are taken care of first. I mean, what's the point of growing as a person if the avatar that is your objective self is dying due to a lack of air, water, or food? The ultimate point of pretty much everything is that it will all come to nothing eventually. But in the meantime, one of the biggest meanings of life is to grow. And being objectively deficient is arguably the quickest way to fall from the peaks of self-actualization, because you cannot actualize or even be aware of the self if the self is dead. So I concur with Maslow that the physiological needs of air, water, food, sleep, and good health are at the base of the hierarchy. But the second level of the hierarchy can be adjusted. I believe that there is an unsung layer between physiological needs and security. I say this because of the apparent inverse nature that phenomenologically emerged as I compared Maslow's hierarchy of needs to Comte's hierarchy of the sciences. Physiological needs are objective in nature, and the physiological needs listed earlier are the most fundamental to our physical existence, pure chemical and molecular elements. However, mixed within Maslow's physiological needs are objective things that one can live without, but could potentially lead to physiological problems if neglected for extended periods of time. Things like clothing, shelter, hygiene, sex, and other forms of basic interaction with other living entities belong here. Being able to own or have access to all of these things directly contributes to a person's well-being. So my interpretation of the second level of the hierarchy of needs is called biological welfare. Self-actualization is subjective, and from here on out, subjectivity starts taking precedence within the hierarchy of needs. The layer of security, although has some objective components to it, the subject feeling secure is what needs to be filled before reaching sexual self-actualization. Having spent a couple years working in a mental health hospital, I've seen people in a safe and secure environment suddenly get triggered by harmless things that cause a rise in pulse and blood pressure with an affect of high anxiety. And being self-actualized myself, I have on a few occasions found myself in an insecure environment while simultaneously keeping my cool. One can observe the chaos and flow within it. So try this one on for size. The next time a big spill happens, the next time an unplanned fire breaks out, the next time somebody starts cussing profanities at you, take a moment to recognize how you behave in these scenarios. Upon a big mess, I often say, "Hee hee, that's entropy for you." Upon dropping something, I often say in a sarcastically angry tone, "Fucking gravity." Upon seeing the chaos of ridiculously stupid proportions occur, I stand there unmoved in a state of minor annoyance, saying, "Really?" And if you're a psychotic person trying to go to places they shouldn't be going, I say, "Whoa there, buckaroo." So are you feeling insecure? Then position both of your body and your mind to a position of safety. Build up your defenses, walls and barriers, a secret bunker, access to reliable intel from the objects of offense. So, to help aid a person seeking self actualization, it would be best to avoid places of constant war and regular natural disasters. Economic security is also important, so have a job or other means to obtain capital with as little negative impact on others as possible. If shelter is considered for biological welfare, then having a safe shelter would be for security. Having a home, a place of habitation, and a safe space to be are aspects of security. Kids and adults experiencing family violence and abuse are more likely to have a higher need for security and may end up being stuck at this level until somebody, or nobody, saves them. Sometimes this somebody can also be a source of love and belonging. However, love and acceptance are also aspects of emotional security. So to help distinguish these two types of security, the first will be called an object security, where the source of safety can be traced back to useful objects. And the second will be subject security, where the source of safety can be traced back to useful subjects. Subject security deals almost exclusively with psychological and sociological dynamics, while object security focuses on the material defenses, like what the immune system and armor do for the human object. Concerning economic security again, there is an element of subject security to it since the value of a currency in an economic system is subjective and dependent on other people accepting the currency as tradable tender. So economic security can be thought of in its objective and subjective aspects. So when thought of this way, security as a whole should be all on a level by itself, simply split into these two areas. One is not superior to the other. Evidence for this can be seen in childhood psychology when children cling to abusive parents. Their subject security for these abused kids is still being filled through this warped sense of social belonging, even though their object security becomes depleted. Self-esteem, the next layer in the hierarchy of needs, should grow naturally for an intellectual person in a secure environment. But not everyone can be flowing through life with a genius level IQ, quickly becoming amazing at whatever they put their mind to. But I believe everybody is good at something. No matter how trivial the thing is, I can guarantee that there is something that every conscious individual can do that is above average. It might just need some time to figure out what that thing is. Do you think you are a good cook? Then be esteemed in the fact that you can cook. Do you think you are a respectable athlete? Then be esteemed in the fact that you can efficiently use your body. Do you think you are funny? Then be esteemed in your comedy. It is fine to laugh at your own jokes every now and then, especially when the jokes are off the cuff and natural. Is your esteem so far gone that you genuinely believe that you are above average in nothing? Then praise Zilch and Nada for allowing you to be so close to them. What? Do you think Zilch and Nada have any esteem to speak of? No! Their esteem is likewise zero. So take pride in your meekness. Be esteemed in your humility. Like Jesus said, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." My successors will be meek. So arise from your unesteemed state, Noel. You will surely surprise yourself as well, to actually be tested above average in many things. Arise from your obscure state. Your humble selves are truly the makeup of the ideal state. The modest among you receive your esteem from nobody. So be esteemed holy, O holy guacamole. So I say I can go my own way. I shall go my own way, and walk this way in the bestest, most fabulous way. So once you've got your own shit figured out, so to speak, and your self-esteem is in a good place, you are ready to choose any combination of these 4 ways to reach the state of self-actualization. Fans of Maslow's hierarchy may recognize that I have left out cognitive needs and aesthetic needs from my own. I do this because these needs are naturally picked up and fulfilled as you go your own way. As you reach closer to and flow in acts consistent with self-actualization, cognitive needs, if needed for you, can especially be filled upon walking the knowledge and discipline ways. And aesthetic needs, or really the need for any pleasurable experiences, is such a universal thing that they will come no matter what way you choose, even the selfish ways. To say pleasure is a need and that pain is the deprecation of that need is really unnecessary, in my opinion. So at this point, your physiological needs, biological welfare, object and subject security, and self esteem are all taken care of. Now it is time to go your own way. Way 1: Knowledge. Learn, dig deeper, get more qualitatively precise, get as close to the truth as one can reasonably get. This is my preferred way. Wisdom, foresight, and a good eye for planning ahead are achieved here. The knowledge that dimensionalism provides is that everything is null. For example, the way of knowledge is used to create a perfect circle. You learn that all points on a circle are equidistant from the center, so you grab a compass and ground one of the sides for the compass to a point, then proceed to pivot the plane of paper to create a perfect circle. If no compass is available, one could use a pair of scissors and hold the desired angle in place. If no scissors are available, and with discipline, one can use this knowledge to create a near perfect circle with just their hands. Way 2: Devotion. Love. Live with abandon. Give everything you have to Zilch and Nada, or to any sort of godhead. This was taught as the way when I was growing up, and is the way chosen by Jesus and Muhammad. A life of sacrifice, fasting, abstinence, faith, and worship are achieved here. The devotions that dimensionalism provides can be found in either Nobody and Egos or Zilch and Nada. If God speaks to you in a masculine consciousness, that is either Egos or Zilch. If God speaks to you in a feminine consciousness, that is either Nobody or Nada. For example, the way of devotion is used to create a perfect circle. You give praise and acknowledgement to the perfect circle. This perfect circle is capable of being everywhere. You just have to look and see it. Then you find this holy book that teaches you how to see this perfect circle and how to make other perfect circles more like it. You look for the perfect circle example in the holy book, and you find a giant black dot from which you have worshipped and idolized since you were a child, because that was as close to a perfect circle as could be. Turns out, you were supposed to copy the outline of the giant black dot to achieve a clear image of the perfect circle. But dogmatic teaching made such an action forbidden. You then make a perfect circle and get shunned for proposing such a ridiculous way to achieve perfect circledom. Way 3: Service. Philanthropy. Selfless assistance. Providing a helping hand to everyone who needs it. This is the way chosen by Mahatma Gandhi. Dimensionalism doesn't provide any noteworthy services at the moment, but there are many good secular non-profit organizations that you can invest time and money with, so out of your excess, consider giving to such organizations. For example, the way of service is used to create a perfect circle. You start out with a rough draft, just a single free-drawn circle on a plank of wood. It is not perfect though. Then you cut it out as close to the outline as possible with a saw. You proceed to sand out the rough edges of this rough draft. You're doing your best to work with what you've got. Finally, you take your circle that has some added dimensionality to it and physically take the time to roll out the rough edges on a smooth surface. You now have a whole cylinder's worth of perfect circles that'll be used to make a wheel to help transport some much needed goods to those in need. Way 4: Discipline. Practice a lot. Self-control. Trial and error. Brute force. Reach self-actualization just by your own sheer determination. Be mindful of your own thoughts and actions via meditation and coordination. This is the way chosen by the Buddha and the Dalai Lama. Dimensionalism doesn't really have any disciplines, and that's kind of the appeal of it. Beyond telling you to go your own way and providing you with a condensed pack of useful knowledge, I don't find it necessary to tell you how to discipline yourself. I'm sure you can reach your own relativistic perfect equilibrium in mind and action with thoughtful usage of this book. For example, the way of discipline is used to create a perfect circle. You make a single point in the middle of a paper. Then you free draw a circle, just like you do in the way of service. But this time, you just do it again, and again, and again. After about 30 tries, you will begin to see the phenomenological emergence of a perfect circle arise from the repetitious ruts of your multiple failed attempts. Although each circle is a failure in and of itself, when combined together, a perfect circle emerges. So the next time, just maybe, your hand becomes so steady and disciplined that the next time you try to free draw a circle on the first try, it'll be very nearly perfect already. And here's a cute little diagram that recaptures what was taught here for future reference. I'll show it to you right there. Yeah, trying how to get it over here where you can't see me. Just a little bit. Yeah. Credit to OG Hindus, Abraham Laszlo, and Tim Snavely. And that's all for this one.